Max's deep, urgent barking cut through the cheerful Christmas carols echoing across Atlanta's central square like a knife through silk. Officer Sarah Collins tightened her grip on his leash, her green eyes scanning the crowd of families admiring the elaborate holiday display. "What's got you so worked up, boy?" she murmured, but Max's attention remained laser-focused on the massive Santa's sleigh centerpiece, his black and tan coat bristling with tension. The December morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of hot chocolate and cinnamon from nearby vendors. Children pointed excitedly at the life-sized reindeer and ornate sleigh, their laughter mixing with the sound of jingling bells from the automated display. But Max wasn't interested in the festivities. His trained nose had detected something else entirely. Sarah had learned to trust her partner's instincts over their 6 years together. Whether it was the warehouse bust last spring or the airport drug seizure that made headlines, Max had never led her astray. His current behavior reminded her of the intensity he'd shown when they'd uncovered the trafficking ring at the shipping docks. "Officer, is there a problem?" A well-dressed man in his 50s approached, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. His name tag read, "Event Coordinator, James Mitchell." "The children are getting frightened by the dog's barking." Sarah studied Mitchell's nervous demeanor. In her experience, innocent people didn't immediately assume police presence meant trouble. "Just a routine check, sir. My partner's indicating something unusual." Max strained against his leash, his barks becoming more insistent as he pulled toward the base of the sleigh. The Belgian Malinois had never been wrong about hidden contraband, and Sarah wasn't about to ignore his alert now. "I'm going to need to examine the display," she announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd handled far more dangerous situations than holiday crowd control. Mitchell's face paled. That's really not necessary. It's just decorations. The children—" "We'll be fine," Sarah interrupted, already moving toward the sleigh. Max's tail wagged briefly, the first sign of approval he'd shown since they'd arrived. "Max, show me." The dog immediately circled to the back of the display, his nose working overtime as he pawed at what appeared to be solid wooden paneling. Sarah knelt beside him, running her hands along the surface. Her fingers found it, a seam so cleverly concealed it would have been invisible without Max's guidance. "Good boy," she whispered, her pulse quickening. The hidden compartment was professional work, not the amateur hour she'd expect from petty criminals. Behind her, she could hear Mitchell speaking rapidly into his phone, his voice tight with panic. Sarah's training kicked in as she photographed the area before attempting to open the compartment. Whatever was inside had been worth going to considerable trouble to hide. The panel slid open with a soft click, revealing a space large enough to hold several briefcases. But it wasn't money or drugs that made Sarah's blood run cold. It was the collection of personal items. Jewelry, photographs, identification cards, and clothing, all carefully organized and labeled with dates spanning the past 3 years. Max whined softly, pressing closer to Sarah's side. He could sense the shift in her demeanor, the way her breathing had changed as the implications hit her. This wasn't just evidence of theft. These looked like trophies. Sarah's radio crackled to life. "Unit 47, what's your status on the disturbance call?" She glanced around the square, noting how Mitchell had disappeared into the crowd. The families continued their holiday shopping, oblivious to what she'd just discovered. Her mind raced through protocol, but instinct told her this case was already bigger than a simple evidence collection. "Unit 47 to dispatch," she replied, her voice steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "I need additional units and a crime scene team at Central Square. We have a potential major case here." Max sat at attention beside her, his dark eyes alert and focused. Sarah placed a reassuring hand on his head, feeling the familiar comfort of their partnership. Whatever they'd stumbled onto, they'd face it together, just like they always had. The Christmas music played on, but Sarah knew that for her and Max, the real work was just beginning. The items in that compartment weren't random. They told a story, and she was determined to uncover every chapter. Sarah's latex gloves snapped as she photographed each item in the hidden compartment, her camera flash illuminating the collection of personal belongings that had turned a festive Christmas display into a crime scene. Max remained stationed beside her, his ears pricked forward as crime scene technicians cordoned off the area with yellow tape. Detective Ray Morrison approached, his weathered face grim as he surveyed the evidence bags already accumulating on the folding table. "What have we got, Collins?" 23 items so far, Sarah replied, holding up a silver bracelet with delicate engravings. "This one's engraved, 'Happy 16th birthday, love Mum.' There's a driver's license here for Jessica Martinez, reported missing 2 years ago Christmas Eve." Max suddenly alerted again, his nose twitching as he moved toward the base of the sleigh where artificial snow had been scattered for decoration. Sarah followed his lead, brushing away the synthetic material to reveal another concealed panel, smaller than the first but equally well hidden. "There's more," she called out, her heart rate spiking. The methodical organization of these hiding spots suggested planning and experience. Whoever had done this wasn't a first-timer. Inside the second compartment, Sarah found what made her stomach turn: photographs. Not family snapshots like those in the first cache, but surveillance photos. Images of young women walking alone, entering buildings, sitting in cafes, all taken without their knowledge. Each photo bore a date stamp from the past 3 holiday seasons. Morrison whistled low. "This is looking like a serial predator case." Sarah's trained eye caught something else, a pattern in the photo locations. "Ray, look at these backgrounds. The coffee shop on Peachtree, the bookstore near Georgia Tech, the bus stop by Centennial Park. These aren't random locations." Max whined softly, pressing against Sarah's leg. She absently scratched behind his ears, her mind already working through the implications. Someone's been hunting, using the Christmas season as cover. The artificial snow beneath the display crunched as Sarah shifted position, and Max immediately pawed at the ground. His behavior indicated more evidence nearby, and Sarah had learned never to ignore his signals. The Belgian Malinois had found everything from hidden drugs to buried weapons. His nose was more reliable than most forensic equipment. "Max, search!" she commanded, giving him his work signal. The dog systematically worked the area, his nose close to the ground as families continued their holiday shopping just beyond the police perimeter. Sarah watched the crowd, noting how normal everything appeared. Parents lifting children for better views of other displays, teenagers taking selfies, elderly couples holding hands as they window shopped. None of them realized they were potentially looking at victims of whatever sick game had been playing out here for years. Max stopped abruptly near one of the decorative reindeer, his tail rigid. Sarah knelt beside him, running her hands along the base until she found another hidden mechanism. This compartment was different. Instead of personal items, it contained detailed maps of Atlanta marked with routes and locations, along with a leather journal filled with dates and coded entries. December 23rd, 2022, PL, successful acquisition. Storage secured, Sarah read aloud. December 19th, 2023, MR. Complications, alternate arrangements made. The entries continued in the same clinical tone, each one representing what Sarah feared was a human life. Morrison looked over her shoulder. PL and MR. Those could be initials. Patricia Lewis, Sarah said immediately, recognizing one of the missing persons cases she'd studied during her detective training. Disappeared Christmas shopping at Lenox Square 2 years ago. Never found. The weight of the discovery settled on her shoulders. This wasn't just evidence of stalking, it was documentation of disappearances, possibly worse. Max seemed to sense her emotional shift, moving closer and resting his muzzle briefly against her arm, in the subtle comfort gesture that had gotten her through their toughest cases. Sarah stood, scanning the dispersing crowd one more time. Someone had used Atlanta's most beloved holiday tradition as hunting grounds, and they'd been doing it for years under everyone's noses. The methodical planning, the multiple hiding spots, the careful documentation. This was the work of someone who felt completely safe, completely invisible. "We need to cross-reference these initials with missing persons reports from the past 3 Christmas seasons," she told Morrison, "and I want to know everything about who had access to set up and maintain this display." Max remained alert, his dark eyes scanning the area, as if sensing that their discovery was only the beginning. Sarah trusted that instinct completely. After 6 years together, she knew when her partner felt a case was far from over. The Christmas carols continued playing from speakers hidden throughout the display, but now the cheerful melodies felt hollow, almost mocking. Someone had turned the season of joy into something sinister, and Sarah was determined to make sure they never got the chance to add another entry to that journal. The Atlanta Police Department's conference room buzzed with activity as Sarah spread the evidence across 3 tables, creating a timeline that made her skin crawl. Max lay at her feet, occasionally lifting his head when someone entered the room, but mostly maintaining the quiet alertness that meant he was still processing scents from the crime scene. 17 missing persons cases over 3 Christmas seasons, Sarah announced to the assembled task force. All young women, all last seen in locations within a 5-mile radius of Central Square. Lieutenant Commander Patricia Hayes studied the photographs pinned to the whiteboard. "That's a hell of a coincidence for someone who just happened to hide evidence in a Christmas display." Sarah pulled up the surveillance photos on her laptop. "These aren't coincidences. Look at the timestamps." She clicked through images showing Jessica Martinez leaving her apartment building, Patricia Lewis walking through Lenox Square's parking garage, Maria Rodriguez waiting at a bus stop. Each photo was taken exactly 3 days before their disappearance was reported. Detective Morrison entered carrying a stack of files. "I cross-referenced the initials from the journal with our missing persons database. Every coded entry matches a case. PL, MR, JM, they're all here." Max suddenly stood, his attention focused on the door as Captain Frank Sullivan walked in. The dog's behavior wasn't alarm, more like recognition of authority, but Sarah noticed how his posture remained tense. "Collins, this case is moving fast," Sullivan said, his voice carrying the weight of department politics. "We've got media asking questions about the Central Square shutdown. What can you tell me about suspects?" "We're still analyzing the evidence, Captain," Sarah replied carefully. "But whoever did this had intimate knowledge of the display's construction and maintenance schedule. They needed regular access over multiple years." Sullivan's jaw tightened. "That's a serious accusation. The city contracts with established companies for these installations." Sarah felt Max shift beside her, a subtle movement that always preceded his alerting behavior. She'd learned to trust these moments. Her partner's instincts often picked up on tensions she hadn't consciously noticed. "Captain, I need the personnel records for everyone involved in setting up Central Square's Christmas displays for the past 3 years, she said. "Construction crews, decorators, maintenance staff, security guards, everyone. That's a lot of people to investigate without concrete evidence pointing to specific individuals," Sullivan replied. But Sarah caught something in his tone that made her exchangeable glance with Morrison. Lieutenant Hayes leaned forward. "Collins, walk us through the geographical pattern again." Sarah pulled up a map of Atlanta on the projector. "The surveillance photos show a systematic approach. Coffee shops near Georgia Tech for college students, bus stops in working-class neighborhoods, shopping centers where young professionals go after work. The predator knew these areas, understood traffic patterns and security blind spots." Max stood and walked to the window, his ears pricked toward the street below. Sarah followed his gaze and saw a black sedan with tinted windows parked across from the police station, the same type of vehicle that had been circling the block when they'd arrived that morning. "Someone's watching us," she said quietly to Morrison. Hayes caught the exchange. "You think the perpetrator knows we're investigating?" "The evidence was hidden too well for this to be random storage," Sarah replied. "Whoever did this expected those compartments to stay secret indefinitely. Our discovery wasn't part of their plan." Morrison pulled up employment records on his tablet. Whitfield Events and Entertainment has held the Christmas display contract for 4 years running. Owner is Marcus Whitfield. Prominent local businessman, sits on several charity boards. Sarah felt a chill that had nothing to do with the December weather. Max alerted to that display for a reason. Someone with legitimate access used their position to hunt. Max returned to her side, pressing against her leg in the subtle communication they'd developed over years of partnership. Something was making him uneasy beyond the evidence they'd found. His instincts were picking up danger signals she couldn't yet identify. "I want surveillance footage from every location where these women were last seen," Sarah told the task force, "and I want it quietly. If our suspect has been operating this systematically for 3 years, they have resources and connections." Captain Sullivan checked his watch. "Collins, I need preliminary reports filed by end of day. This case needs to move through proper channels." As the meeting dispersed, Sarah remained behind with Max, studying the timeline one more time. 17 women, 3 years, all during the season when Atlanta celebrated community and togetherness. Someone had weaponized the city's holiday spirit, turning celebration into hunting season. Max looked up at her with dark, intelligent eyes that seemed to understand the gravity of what they'd uncovered. Sarah scratched behind his ears, drawing comfort from their partnership. "We're going to get this bastard," she whispered. "Every single one of these women deserves justice." Outside, the black sedan pulled away from the curb, but Sarah had already memorized the license plate. Someone was definitely watching, which meant they were getting close to something the perpetrator desperately wanted to keep hidden. Max's continued alertness told her they'd barely scratched the surface of this case. Sarah's computer screen went black just as she was about to access Marcus Whitfield's personnel files. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. Max raised his head from where he'd been resting beside her desk, sensing her frustration through the sudden tension in her body language. "Morrison, are you having system issues?" she called across the bullpen. "No, everything's running fine over here," he replied, not looking up from his own computer. "Why?" Before Sarah could answer, Captain Sullivan appeared at her cubicle entrance. "Collins, I need to see you in my office, now." Max immediately stood, his training kicking in as he prepared to follow. The Belgian Malinois had accompanied Sarah to countless meetings over their partnership, but something in Sullivan's tone made the dog's ears flatten slightly. "Leave the dog," Sullivan said curtly. "This is a private conversation." Sarah's instincts flared. In 6 years, no superior had ever asked her to leave Max behind unless the meeting involved sensitive operational details that required absolute confidentiality. She gave Max a subtle hand signal to stay, watching as he reluctantly settled beside her desk chair. Sullivan's office felt smaller than usual, the blinds drawn despite the afternoon sun. He gestured for Sarah to sit, but remained standing himself, a power dynamic she recognized from interrogation training. "I've been reviewing your case files, Collins, your request for extended surveillance footage, personnel records, and expanded investigative resources." He paused, his fingers drumming against his desk. "I'm pulling you off the Central Square case." Sarah felt the words hit her like a physical blow. "Captain, with respect, we've made significant progress in less than 48 hours. We have 17 connected cases and a clear pattern of—" "You have coincidences and speculation," Sullivan interrupted. "The city can't afford to have one of its most prominent businessmen investigated based on circumstantial evidence. Marcus Whitfield contributes significantly to local charities and employs hundreds of people. Sir, the evidence indicates that someone used a Christmas display as a hiding place. That doesn't automatically implicate the contractor." Sullivan's voice carried a finality that made Sarah's stomach drop. "Detective Morrison will take lead on this case. You're being reassigned to drug interdiction at the airport." Sarah stood slowly, her mind racing. The airport assignment was a lateral move that would effectively remove her from any involvement in the Central Square investigation. "Captain, Max alerted to that display for a specific reason. His instincts have never been wrong in 6 years of partnership." Your dog found evidence that someone else planted, Sullivan said dismissively. That doesn't make you the right investigator for this case. Through the office's glass wall, Sarah could see Max watching them intently. The dog's posture indicated alertness bordering on agitation. He could sense something was wrong, even from across the room. Sir, I'd like to request a meeting with Lieutenant Hayes about maintaining involvement in this investigation. Sullivan's expression hardened. Hayes has already been briefed on the reassignment. This decision comes from above her pay grade, Collins. Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be. Sarah felt the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. Someone with significant influence had intervened to protect Whitfield from investigation. The timing of her computer access being blocked, the sudden reassignment, the emphasis on Whitfield's community standing, it all pointed to pressure being applied from outside the department. Understood, Captain, she said carefully, knowing that arguing further would only confirm his suspicions about her intentions. When do I report for the airport assignment? Monday morning. Take the weekend to transition your current cases to other investigators. Sullivan opened his office door, clearly dismissing her. And Collins, I trust you understand the importance of following department protocols and chain of command. The warning was unmistakable. Sarah nodded and walked back to her desk, where Max immediately stood and pressed against her leg. The dog's contact was comforting, but also confirming. He'd sensed the hostility in that office, even from a distance. Morrison approached as she began gathering files from her desk. What happened in there? I've been reassigned, Sarah said quietly, aware that other detectives might be listening. You're taking lead on Central Square. Morrison's face showed genuine surprise. That's crazy. You and Max broke this case wide open. Why would Sullivan— Orders from above, Sarah interrupted, giving him a meaningful look. Make sure those evidence files are properly secured, Ray. Backed up in multiple locations. Understanding flickered in Morrison's eyes. Already done. Multiple copies, multiple locations. Sarah felt a small surge of relief. Morrison was a good detective who would continue pursuing the investigation despite political pressure. But she also knew that without her and Max's specialized skills, crucial evidence might be missed. As she packed her personal items, Max remained close, his dark eyes watching everyone who approached their workspace. The dog's protective instincts were heightened, responding to threats Sarah couldn't yet fully identify. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Some cases are better left unsolved. Enjoy your new assignment. Sarah deleted the message immediately, but not before Max noticed her sudden tension. Someone was definitely watching, and now they were making direct contact. The reassignment wasn't just political maneuvering. It was a deliberate attempt to derail an investigation that was getting too close to dangerous truths. She looked down at Max, who met her gaze with the unwavering loyalty that had carried them through every challenge of their partnership. Tomorrow was Friday. They had the weekend to decide how to proceed. Come on, boy, she said softly. Let's go home and figure out our next move. Sarah's apartment felt unusually quiet as she sat on her couch Friday evening, Max's warm weight pressed against her side. The Belgian Malinois had been unusually clingy since they'd left the station, his protective instincts heightened by the day's events. She absently stroked his fur while staring at the case files she'd discreetly copied before leaving the office. The familiar ritual of reviewing evidence reminded her of another December night 3 years ago, when she and Max had faced their first major corruption case. She'd been a newer K-9 officer then, still learning to fully trust Max's alerts when everyone else dismissed them as false positives. "Remember the warehouse district case, boy?" she murmured, and Max's ears perked up at the familiar tone she used when working through difficult investigations. They'd been investigating what appeared to be routine drug trafficking when Max had alerted to a shipping container that other officers insisted was clean. Sarah had trusted her partner's instincts despite pressure from superiors to move on. Inside that container, they'd found not just drugs, but evidence of a human trafficking operation that reached into the highest levels of the Port Authority. The parallel to their current situation was unmistakable. Once again, Max had detected something others wanted to ignore, and once again, powerful people were trying to shut down their investigation. Sarah pulled out her laptop and opened a secure folder containing photos from that earlier case. The warehouse operation had been run by someone who seemed legitimate on the surface, a respected businessman with charity connections and political ties, just like Marcus Whitfield. Max shifted position, resting his muzzle on her laptop keyboard as if sensing her emotional state. The dog had always been remarkably attuned to her stress levels, offering comfort exactly when she needed it most. "That case taught us something important," Sarah said, scratching behind Max's ears. "The bigger the operation, the more legitimate it appears on the surface." She remembered how the warehouse investigation had nearly cost her career. Detective Hansen, her partner at the time, had received orders to drop the case after they'd identified the main suspect. But Sarah had learned that sometimes following orders meant allowing innocent people to suffer. The breakthrough had come when Max had led them to a second location, following scent trails that human investigators had missed entirely. Without his specialized abilities, they never would have found the evidence that exposed the entire network. Her phone buzzed with a call from Morrison. "Sarah, I wanted to update you on the case before the weekend. Someone broke into the evidence locker tonight." Sarah's blood ran cold. "What was taken?" "Nothing, apparently, but someone definitely accessed the Central Square evidence. The lock was picked professionally, and security footage from that corridor mysteriously malfunctioned for exactly 37 minutes. Max lifted his head, responding to the sudden tension in Sarah's voice. "Ray, this isn't random. Someone's trying to see what we found. Gets worse. I tried to pull Whitfield's employment records this afternoon. Every database I accessed suddenly required additional authorization levels that didn't exist yesterday." Sarah stood and began pacing, Max shadowing her movements with the alert focus he showed during active investigations. "They're systematically blocking our access to information." "There's something else," Morrison continued. "I ran background checks on the other contractors who worked Central Square displays in previous years. 2 companies that used to bid on the contract both went out of business within 6 months of losing to Whitfield Events. The pattern was becoming clearer. Someone had been eliminating competition to maintain exclusive access to prime hunting grounds. Sarah thought back to the warehouse case, remembering how they'd discovered similar tactics, legitimate businesses pushed out to make room for criminal operations. "Ray, in the warehouse case, we found the break when Max traced scent connections between supposedly unrelated locations. These missing women, were any of them found at different sites? Patricia Lewis's purse was found in a dumpster behind a restaurant downtown. Maria Rodriguez's cell phone pinged towers near the airport before going dead. Why?" Sarah felt the familiar excitement of pieces clicking into place. "Max might be able to connect these locations if we can get him to the sites. Scent evidence lasts much longer than most people realize." Max's tail wagged slightly. He'd heard his name and sensed they were discussing work. After 6 years together, the dog had learned to associate Sarah's investigative tone with the challenging, rewarding work he'd been trained for. "Sarah, you're off the case officially. If Sullivan finds out you're still investigating, then we'll have to make sure he doesn't find out." Sarah looked down at Max, whose dark eyes reflected the same determination she felt. "Morrison, someone is using their legitimate business to hunt women during Christmas season. 17 women, Ray. How many more will disappear while we play politics?" The warehouse case had taught her that sometimes the system failed, and good cops had to find other ways to protect innocent people. She'd faced internal investigations, threats to her career, and pressure to stay silent. But she'd also learned that justice sometimes required taking calculated risks. "I'll meet you tomorrow morning at Patricia Lewis's last known location," Morrison said quietly. Unofficial consultation from the K9 unit. After hanging up, Sarah sat back down beside Max, who immediately resumed his protective position against her side. The dog's presence reminded her that they'd faced seemingly impossible cases before and prevailed through combination of determination, skill, and absolute trust in each other. She opened the case files again, but this time with renewed focus. Somewhere in these details was the key to stopping a predator who'd been operating with impunity for years. Max had found the first clues, and together they'd find the rest, regardless of who tried to stop them. Sarah's morning jog with Max took an unexpected turn when the same black sedan from yesterday began following them through Piedmont Park. The dog's ears flattened as the vehicle maintained a steady distance, its tinted windows making it impossible to identify the occupants. "Easy, boy," Sarah murmured, keeping her pace steady while mentally mapping escape routes through the park's winding trails. Max's training included evasion tactics, and his powerful build could outdistance most human pursuers if necessary. The sedan accelerated as they approached the park's main entrance, pulling alongside them as Sarah reached for her off-duty weapon. The passenger window rolled down, revealing a man in an expensive suit whose face she didn't recognize. "Officer Collins, you should consider your career prospects more carefully," the man said in a tone that carried decades of practiced intimidation. "Good cops know when to follow orders." Max positioned himself between Sarah and the vehicle, his hackles raised and muscles coiled for action. The Belgian Malinois had shifted into protection mode, ready to defend his partner against any threat. "And smart businessmen know not to threaten police officers in public," Sarah replied evenly, noting the park's security cameras that would capture this interaction. The man smiled coldly. "Threatening? I'm offering advice. Your new airport assignment could lead to excellent opportunities for someone who demonstrates proper judgment." Jizz. The sedan drove away before Sarah could respond, but not before she memorized the license plate and noted the passenger's distinctive scar along his left jawline. Max remained tense until the vehicle disappeared completely, then looked up at her with eyes that reflected both alertness and concern. Sarah's phone rang as they walked home. Morrison's voice was tight with urgency. "Sarah, someone broke into my apartment last night. Nothing stolen, but they went through everything. My case files, computer, even personal photos. They're escalating," Sarah said, automatically scanning the street for surveillance. "Ray, you need to assume your communications are compromised. Already switched to a burner phone. Listen, I visited Patricia Lewis's last known location this morning. The restaurant manager finally admitted something he didn't tell the original investigators. Lewis was asking about job opportunities the day she disappeared." Sarah felt Max press closer to her leg as her tension increased. "What kind of job opportunities?" "Event planning work. Specifically, someone had approached her about seasonal employment with a catering company that works Christmas events." Morrison paused. "The company was subcontracted by Whitfield Events." The pattern was becoming clearer and more sinister. Sarah's mind raced through the implications as she unlocked her apartment door, Max immediately conducting a security sweep of the rooms, behavior that had become instinctive after their encounter with the sedan. "Ray, these women weren't random victims. They were being recruited. Gets worse, I found similar employment inquiries connected to 3 other missing women. All were approached about temporary holiday work in the weeks before they disappeared." Sarah's laptop chimed with an email notification. The subject line made her blood freeze. "Career advice for Officer Collins." The message contained a single photo, Max sleeping in her apartment, taken from an angle that proved someone had been inside her home. "Max, come here!" she called urgently, needing the comfort of his presence as the violation sank in. Someone had been in her sanctuary, photographing her partner while they slept. The dog immediately responded to the stress in her voice, pressing against her side as she forwarded the email to Morrison. Her hands shook slightly as she typed, the reality of how exposed they were hitting home. Morrison's response was immediate. "Pack a bag. You're staying at my place tonight." "No, Ray. They want us running scared and making mistakes." Sarah stood, feeling Max's supportive presence give her strength. "Besides, they've already demonstrated they can get to us anywhere." She walked through her apartment methodically, checking every room while Max shadowed her movements. The violation felt personal in a way that professional threats never had. Her home was where she and Max relaxed, played, bonded as partners and friends. Having strangers invade that space crossed a line that made this case deeply personal. In her bedroom, Sarah found what the intruders had left behind, a small listening device attached to her bedside lamp. Professional-grade equipment that suggested resources far beyond typical criminal enterprises. Her phone buzzed with a text from the same unknown number as before. Some partnerships are more valuable than others. Max is a beautiful dog. Sarah deleted the message, but the threat was unmistakable. They weren't just threatening her career anymore, they were threatening Max. The Belgian Malinois represented everything Sarah valued most: loyalty, integrity, and the courage to do what was right, regardless of personal cost. "They made a mistake," she said aloud, looking down at Max's trusting eyes. "They think threatening you will make me back down." Max's tail wagged slightly, responding to the determined tone he associated with their most challenging cases. After 6 years together, the dog had learned to read Sarah's moods with uncanny accuracy. He could sense when she was shifting from defensive to offensive thinking. Sarah began packing a go-bag with essentials for both her and Max. If powerful people wanted to play intimidation games, they'd learn that threatening a K9 officer's partner was the fastest way to guarantee she'd never stop investigating. She made one final check of her security system, noting that someone had indeed bypassed her locks without triggering alarms. Professional work that confirmed the level of resources arrayed against them. "Come on, boy," she said, clipping Max's tactical leash to his collar. "Let's go pay an unofficial visit to Whitfield Events. Time to see what they're really hiding." Max's ears perked forward with eager anticipation. After a morning of defensive maneuvering, he was ready to get back to the work they both lived for. Whitfield Events' corporate headquarters occupied a gleaming glass building in Atlanta's business district, its lobby decorated with photographs of elaborate charity galas and community celebrations. Sarah studied the images while Max conducted a discreet scent survey of the area, his nose working overtime to process the complex mix of human activity. "Can I help you?" The receptionist's smile faltered when she noticed Max's police harness and tactical equipment. "Officer Collins, Atlanta PD K9 unit," Sarah said, showing her badge while keeping her tone professional. "I'm following up on some questions about your Central Square Christmas display contract." The receptionist's fingers moved quickly across her keyboard. "I'm sorry, but Mr. Whitfield is in meetings all afternoon. Perhaps you could schedule an appointment for next week." Max's ears suddenly pricked forward, his attention focused on something beyond the lobby's main doors. Sarah followed his gaze and spotted 2 men in business suits entering the building. One of them was the scarred man from the sedan this morning. "Actually, I think Mr. Whitfield just became available," Sarah said quietly, watching as the men headed directly for the elevator without stopping at reception. The receptionist looked confused until she followed Sarah's gaze. "Oh, that's Mr. Davidson and Mr. Chen. They're consultants." Sarah filed the names away, while Max began showing signs of increased alertness. The dog's behavior indicated he was detecting scents associated with stress, fear, or something else that triggered his protective instincts. "I'll wait," Sarah announced, settling into one of the lobby's leather chairs. Max positioned himself where he could observe both the elevator and main entrance, his training taking over despite the civilian environment. 20 minutes later, elevator doors opened to reveal Marcus Whitfield himself, a distinguished man in his 50s whose expensive suit and confident bearing projected exactly the kind of respectability that made effective camouflage for criminal enterprises. "Officer Collins," Whitfield said, his voice carrying surprised warmth that didn't reach his eyes. "I understand you have questions about our city contracts." Max's hackles rose slightly as Whitfield approached, a subtle reaction that Sarah had learned never to ignore. Her partner's instincts about people were remarkably accurate, and his current body language suggested something was definitely wrong with this man. "Mr. Whitfield, I'm investigating evidence found hidden in your Central Square Christmas display. I need to know who had access to the installation site during construction and maintenance." Whitfield's smile remained fixed, but Sarah caught the slight tightening around his eyes. "Of course, officer. Though I must say our company maintains the highest security standards. It's disturbing to think someone might have used our display for criminal purposes. Someone with intimate knowledge of the display's construction," Sarah pressed. "This wasn't random vandalism. It required planning and regular access over multiple years." Multiple years? Whitfield's surprise seemed genuine, but Max's continued agitation suggested otherwise. "Officer, we've only held this contract for 4 years. Are you suggesting this has been ongoing?" Sarah noticed he'd avoided directly answering her question about access. "Mr. Whitfield, I need complete personnel records for everyone who worked on Central Square installations, including subcontractors and temporary employees. Certainly, though I'll need to have our legal department review what information we can share without violating privacy policies." Whitfield checked his expensive watch. These things take time to process properly. Max suddenly stood and moved closer to the elevator, his nose working intensively. Sarah had seen this behavior before. The dog was tracking a specific scent trail that connected to evidence from their investigation. "Max, what is it?" she asked, knowing her partner had detected something significant. The elevator doors opened again, revealing a young woman in catering uniforms pushing a cart of cleaning supplies. Max's reaction was immediate and intense. His entire body went rigid with the focused attention he showed when detecting contraband or evidence. The woman froze when she saw Max's alerting behavior, her face draining of color. In that moment, Sarah realized they weren't just looking at an employee. They were looking at someone who might have direct knowledge of the crimes they were investigating. "Excuse me," Sarah called out, but the woman abandoned her cart and ran for the stairwell exit. "Max, track," Sarah commanded, and the Belgian Malinois immediately began following the scent trail the woman had left behind. Whitfield stepped forward as if to intervene. "Officer, I really must insist that you coordinate any investigations through proper channels. Our employees have rights." "Your employee just fled from a police dog," Sarah interrupted, already moving toward the stairwell. "That suggests she has something to hide." Max led her up 2 flights of stairs before stopping at a heavy fire door. His behavior indicated the scent trail continued beyond this point, but the door was locked with electronic security that required keycard access. Sarah's radio crackled as she called for backup. "This is Unit 47, requesting additional units at Whitfield Events headquarters, possible suspect fleeing on foot." When she returned to the lobby, Whitfield was speaking quietly with Davidson and Chen. All 3 men stopped talking abruptly when they saw her, their expressions shifting to the kind of careful neutrality that Sarah associated with people coordinating their stories. "Mr. Whitfield, I need that employee's name and contact information immediately." "I'm afraid I don't know which employee you're referring to," Whitfield replied smoothly. "We have several cleaning contractors who work different shifts." Max positioned himself between Sarah and the 3 men, his protective instincts fully engaged. The dog's behavior confirmed what Sarah's training had already told her. She was standing in the middle of something much larger than a single criminal using Christmas displays as hiding spots. "Mr. Whitfield," Sarah said carefully, "I'm going to need those personnel records today, not next week, and I'll need security footage from your building for the past hour." Whitfield's mask finally slipped slightly. "Officer Collins, I think you'll find that investigating prominent local businesses requires more authorization than a single K9 officer can provide." The statement confirmed what Sarah had suspected. Whitfield knew about her reassignment and was counting on political pressure to shut down her investigation. But he'd made a crucial mistake by revealing that knowledge. Sarah smiled grimly as backup units announced their arrival. "Mr. Whitfield, you're absolutely right. This case is definitely bigger than one K9 officer can handle. Max wagged his tail once, the equivalent of a canine smile that meant they'd just uncovered something significant. Morrison's burner phone buzzed with a priority message as he sat in his car outside Whitfield Events, watching backup units secure the building's perimeter. The text contained a single word that made his blood run cold: basement. Sarah emerged from the building with Max at her side, both of them moving with the focused intensity that indicated a major breakthrough. The Belgian Malinois remained alert, his ears constantly swiveling to track sounds and movements around the scene. "The cleaning woman's name is Elena Vasquez," Sarah reported as she reached Morrison's vehicle. "Undocumented immigrant from Guatemala, been working for Whitfield subcontractors for 2 years. Security footage shows her accessing areas of the building that aren't part of her normal duties." Morrison showed her the cryptic text message. "This came from an unknown number 5 minutes ago. Someone wants us to check the basement." Max immediately oriented toward the building's lower level, his nose working as if he'd caught a familiar scent. Sarah had learned to trust these moments when her partner's instincts aligned with investigative leads. It usually meant they were on the right track. "Ray, pull everything you can find on Marcus Whitfield's background. Not just business records, personal history, family connections, properties he owns or has access to." While Morrison worked his contacts, Sarah studied the building's architecture through Max's perspective. The dog's continued interest in the basement level suggested something significant was located below ground, something that connected to the scents he detected at the Central Square crime scene. Morrison's phone rang 20 minutes later. "Sarah, you need to hear this. Whitfield's younger brother David died in a car accident 15 years ago, Christmas Eve night. But here's the interesting part. David was under investigation for sexual assault charges involving 3 different women." Sarah felt pieces clicking into place with disturbing clarity. "Let me guess. The charges were dropped after David's death, and Marcus stepped in to handle his brother's legacy. Gets darker. I found property records showing Marcus inherited David's warehouse complex near the airport, the same complex that was supposedly sold to developers 5 years ago." Max's ears pricked forward as Sarah's tension increased. The dog could sense when investigations took turns toward dangerous discoveries, and his protective instincts heightened accordingly. "Ray, what if Marcus isn't just hiding evidence of his own crimes? What if he's been continuing something his brother started?" Morrison's laptop screen showed aerial photographs of the warehouse complex. According to city records, the buildings were demolished in 2020, but satellite imagery from last month shows structures that match the original warehouse footprints. Sarah studied the images while Max pressed closer to her side. The dog's behavior indicated they were discussing something that connected to scents and evidence he'd encountered before. "The Christmas connection isn't coincidental," Sarah realized aloud. "Marcus is operating some kind of twisted memorial to his dead brother, using the holiday season when David died." Her phone rang with a call from Lieutenant Hayes. "Collins, I need you back at the station immediately. We've received a formal complaint about your unauthorized investigation of Whitfield events. Lieutenant, we've uncovered evidence of—" "Not over the phone," Hayes interrupted. "Get here now and bring Morrison." The drive back to headquarters felt tense, with Max maintaining the alert posture he showed when sensing impending confrontation. Sarah's mind raced through the implications of what they'd discovered, while Morrison coordinated with contacts who could access property records without triggering official channels. Lieutenant Hayes's office was crowded when they arrived. Captain Sullivan sat behind Hayes's desk, flanked by 2 men in expensive suits who radiated the kind of authority that came from political connections rather than law enforcement experience. "Officer Collins," Sullivan began without preamble, "you've been conducting unauthorized investigations despite direct orders to cease involvement in this case." Max positioned himself protectively beside Sarah's chair, his presence offering comfort as she faced what was clearly a coordinated effort to shut down their investigation. "Captain, We've uncovered evidence of an ongoing criminal enterprise that you've harassed a respected businessman based on circumstantial evidence and conspiracy theories. One of the suited men interrupted. Mr. Whitfield has legitimate concerns about police overreach. Sarah noticed Hayes looked uncomfortable with the proceedings, her eyes avoiding direct contact with Sarah's. Political pressure was being applied at multiple levels to protect Whitfield's operation. "Gentlemen," Sarah said carefully, "my canine partner alerted to evidence hidden in a Christmas display. That led us to documentation of 17 missing women and clear patterns of criminal activity. Are you suggesting we ignore that evidence?" "We're suggesting you follow proper procedures and chain of command," Sullivan replied. "Effective immediately. You're suspended pending internal investigation of your conduct." Max's ears flattened as Sarah's stress levels spiked. The dog could sense the injustice of the situation, even without understanding the specific words being spoken. Morrison leaned forward. "Captain, with respect, suspending the officer who broke this case open sends a message that political connections matter more than justice." "Detective Morrison, you're also being reassigned," Sullivan announced. "This case is being transferred to a federal task force with appropriate resources and authorization." As they left Hayes's office, Sarah felt the weight of institutional betrayal settling on her shoulders. But Max's steady presence reminded her that some partnerships transcended bureaucratic politics. "Ray, they're not just protecting Whitfield," she whispered as they walked toward the parking garage. "They're giving him time to destroy evidence and relocate whatever operation he's running." Morrison nodded grimly. 17 women, Sarah. How many more will disappear while we play politics?" Max looked up at both of them with eyes that reflected the same determination Sarah felt building inside her chest. Sometimes justice required going outside official channels. The warehouse complex looked abandoned from the outside, its windows painted black and loading docks sealed with rusted metal sheets. But Max's body language told a different story. His nose was working overtime, processing scents that made his entire frame tremble with anticipation and concern. Sarah crouched beside her partner in the shadows of an adjacent building, studying the facility through binoculars, while Morrison monitored police radio traffic from their borrowed surveillance van. They'd been watching for 3 hours, documenting the seemingly random pattern of vehicles that entered through a concealed entrance on the complex's north side. "Movement," Morrison whispered into his earpiece. "Black SUV, same model we've seen twice tonight." Sarah watched as 2 men emerged from the vehicle, both carrying what appeared to be fast food bags. But Max's reaction suggested they were transporting something far more significant than dinner. "Max smells fear," Sarah reported quietly. "Human fear, stress hormones, the kind of sense he associates with victims in distress." The Belgian Malinois had been trained to detect emotional states through chemical signatures that humans couldn't perceive. His current behavior, ears forward, muscles coiled, whining softly, indicated he was detecting multiple people in acute psychological distress. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from the same unknown number that had been threatening them. "Some rescues aren't worth the cost. Walk away now." Instead of deleting the message, she forwarded it to Morrison along with her own response. "They know we're here. This confirms victims are inside." Morrison's voice was grim as he updated her on radio traffic. 3 units just got called to a suspicious activity report at your apartment complex. Someone's trying to pull resources away from this area." Sarah felt the familiar weight of impossible choices settling on her shoulders. Wait for backup that might never come, or act immediately to save lives that might be lost while bureaucrats played politics. Max pressed against her leg, offering the comfort that had sustained her through every difficult decision of their partnership. "Ray, I'm going in. If there are victims inside, every minute we wait increases their danger." "Sarah, you're suspended. Anything you do here won't be admissible in court, and you could face criminal charges for unauthorized action." 17 women, Ray. How many of them are still alive in there? Sarah checked her service weapon and adjusted Max's tactical harness. My job isn't to make cases that prosecutors can win. It's to protect people who can't protect themselves. Max's training included building searches under dangerous conditions, but Sarah knew that what they were about to attempt violated every safety protocol in the K-9 unit's handbook. She was asking her partner to risk his life based on instinct and moral conviction rather than official authorization. "Max, are you ready to work?" she asked, using the formal command that preceded their most challenging operations. The dog's response was immediate and unambiguous. Tail up, ears forward, every muscle prepared for action. After 6 years together, Max trusted Sarah's judgment completely, even when it led them into danger. They moved toward the warehouse complex using cover provided by abandoned vehicles and overgrown vegetation. Max's nose guided their approach, leading them to a service entrance where his alerts became more intense. The scent signatures he was detecting were stronger here, suggesting this was a primary access point. Sarah's lock-picking skills, learned during specialized training for undercover operations, made quick work of the electronic security system. The door opened silently, revealing a dimly lit corridor that smelled of industrial cleaning chemicals and something else, the distinctive odor of human captivity that Max recognized from their trafficking cases. They moved through the building methodically, Max indicating direction, while Sarah provided tactical support. The warehouse had been extensively modified, with soundproofing and subdivided spaces that suggested long-term planning for criminal activities. Max stopped abruptly outside a heavy door marked Storage Unit 7. His alert behavior indicated multiple human scents beyond the barrier, accompanied by the stress markers that meant extreme fear or trauma. Sarah placed her ear against the door and heard what made her heart race. Muffled voices, female voices, speaking in what sounded like multiple languages. The victims were alive, but her rescue attempt had just become infinitely more complicated. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call from Morrison. "Sarah, company's coming. 3 vehicles just entered the complex, moving fast toward your position." The moral calculation was stark and immediate. She could retreat now, preserving her and Max's safety while maintaining the element of surprise for a future operation. Or she could attempt an immediate rescue, knowing that discovery would trigger a confrontation she might not survive. Max looked up at her with complete trust, waiting for the decision that would determine whether 17 women lived or died. His faith in her judgment was absolute, regardless of the personal cost. Sarah made the only choice her conscience would allow. "Max, we're getting them out, all of them." She began working on the door's lock mechanism, while Max positioned himself to provide early warning of approaching threats. Behind the door, she could hear movement, people responding to the sound of potential rescue. The lock clicked open just as Morrison's voice crackled through her earpiece with words that confirmed their worst fears. "Sarah, you've got armed men entering the building. Multiple hostiles, moving to surround your position." Sarah opened the door to reveal 6 women in various states of physical and psychological trauma, their eyes reflecting both hope and terror at the sight of her police uniform and Max's tactical gear. "Atlanta Police," she announced quietly. "We're here to get you out." But even as she spoke, Sarah knew that getting these women to safety would require navigating a gauntlet of armed criminals who would stop at nothing to protect their operation. Sarah quickly assessed the 6 women huddled in the makeshift prison, her tactical training taking over as she calculated escape routes, while Max maintained watch at the door. The youngest victim couldn't be more than 18, while the oldest appeared to be in her 30s, all fitting the profile of the missing women from their investigation. "Can anyone walk?" Sarah asked quietly, noting that 2 of the women showed signs of recent injuries. A dark-haired woman, who appeared to be the group's informal leader, stepped forward. "I'm Maria Rodriguez. We've been planning to escape, but they keep us sedated, and the building is like a maze." Sarah's heart lurched at the name. Maria Rodriguez had been missing for 8 months, one of the cases documented in Whitfield's hidden journal. "Maria, I'm Officer Collins. We're going to get all of you out of here." Max's ears suddenly flattened as he detected approaching footsteps in the corridor. Sarah motioned for silence while pressing her earpiece to maintain contact with Morrison. "Ray, I need extraction routes and a distraction. We have 6 victims, 2 with mobility issues." Morrison's voice was tight with urgency. "Sarah, I count at least 8 hostiles moving through the building. They're conducting a systematic search and they know you're here." Sarah studied the room's layout, noting a ventilation grate large enough for human passage and a second door that appeared to lead to an adjacent storage area. Max's nose twitched as he processed air currents, his training allowing him to map the building's layout through scent trails. "Maria, how many guards are there normally?" 4 during the day, but more come at night. They're expecting a delivery tonight." Maria's voice broke slightly. 3 of us were supposed to be moved to another location." Sarah felt ice form in her stomach. The timing of their rescue attempt had coincided with a transfer operation, meaning Whitfield's people were prepared for resistance and had additional security present. Her phone buzzed with a call from Lieutenant Hayes. Against her better judgment, Sarah answered. "Collins, where the hell are you? We have reports of shots fired at the warehouse district. Lieutenant, I have 6 kidnapping victims in custody and need immediate backup with medical support." Sarah kept her voice professional despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "Sarah, you're suspended. Whatever you're doing is completely unauthorized and, ma'am, with respect, these women will be dead if I wait for authorization." Sarah ended the call and switched her phone to silent mode. Max alerted to movement beyond the second door, his body language indicating multiple human presences moving in coordinated patterns. Sarah recognized the behavior. They were facing trained individuals, not random criminals. "Ray, they're moving like a tactical team. This isn't just warehouse security." Morrison's response confirmed her worst fears. "Sarah, I'm seeing professional-grade communications equipment and coordinated movement patterns. These guys have military or law enforcement training." Sarah began implementing the emergency extraction protocol she'd hoped never to use outside of training scenarios. The plan required splitting their group to maximize survival chances while ensuring the victims reached safety. "Maria, I need you to lead the others through that ventilation system to the building's east side. My partner here will provide a distraction while you escape." Max looked up at Sarah with the complete trust that had sustained their partnership through every dangerous operation. The Belgian Malinois understood that he was being asked to draw hostile fire away from the victims, a mission that significantly increased his personal risk. "Maria, once you're outside, run toward the main road and flag down any police vehicle you see. Tell them Officer Collins has additional victims inside and needs immediate backup." Sarah checked her service weapon and spare ammunition, while Max positioned himself for the coordinated movement they'd practiced countless times. The dog's training included creating diversions that allowed his handler to maneuver tactically, but this situation was more dangerous than any scenario they'd rehearsed. Morrison's voice crackled through her earpiece. "Sarah, I just called in an officer down situation at your location. Every available unit is responding, but you need to hold position for at least 15 minutes. 15 minutes felt like an eternity when facing armed criminals who had demonstrated their willingness to kill to protect their operation. Sarah calculated ammunition, cover positions, and escape routes, while the women prepared to move through the ventilation system. "Max, are you ready for tactical diversion?" she asked, using the formal command that preceded their most dangerous operations. The dog's response was immediate. Ears forward, muscles coiled, every sense focused on the mission ahead. After 6 years together, Max trusted Sarah's judgment completely, even when it meant facing overwhelming odds. Sarah heard vehicles arriving outside the warehouse, but couldn't determine whether they were law enforcement or additional criminals. The uncertainty meant she had to assume hostile intent and prepare accordingly. "Maria, go now. Stay low, move fast, and don't look back no matter what you hear." As the women began crawling through the ventilation system, Sarah positioned herself to provide covering fire, while Max prepared to execute the diversionary tactics that would give the victims their best chance of survival. Her radio crackled with Morrison's final update. "Sarah, whatever happens next, you've already saved 6 lives tonight, remember that." Sarah looked down at Max, whose dark eyes reflected the same determination she felt building inside her chest. They'd faced impossible odds before and survived through skill, courage, and absolute trust in each other. "Okay, boy," she whispered. "Let's finish this." Max's tail wagged once, the equivalent of a canine salute that meant he was ready to follow her into whatever danger awaited. The warehouse erupted into chaos as Max executed his diversionary attack, his powerful form launching through the second door with the precision of 6 years' tactical training. Sarah heard shouts of surprise and alarm as the Belgian Malinois engaged multiple targets, his aggressive barking echoing through the complex corridors. "Atlanta PD, drop your weapons," Sarah shouted as she moved through the doorway, her service weapon trained on the first hostile she encountered. Davidson, the scarred man from the sedan, now holding an assault rifle instead of making corporate threats. Davidson spun toward her, but Max's intervention had disrupted their coordinated positions. The dog had taken down one gunman and was engaging a second, his tactical training allowing him to neutralize threats while avoiding lethal force whenever possible. Sarah's first shot caught Davidson in the shoulder, spinning him around as his weapon clattered across the concrete floor. Behind her, she could hear the victims moving through the ventilation system toward freedom, their escape covered by the confusion Max had created. "Chen, get the dog!" someone shouted from deeper in the warehouse, and Sarah saw the second consultant from Whitfield's office emerge from cover with a tactical shotgun. Max immediately shifted targets, his training allowing him to assess and prioritize threats with split-second decision-making. The dog's charge forced Chen to retreat, but also exposed Max to crossfire from additional gunmen Sarah hadn't yet located. "Max, cover!" Sarah commanded, and her partner immediately sought shelter behind a stack of shipping containers while she advanced on Chen's position. The sound of sirens in the distance meant Morrison's backup call was working, but Sarah knew they had to survive the next few minutes without support. The warehouse's acoustics amplified every sound, making it difficult to determine exact positions of remaining hostiles. Sarah's radio crackled with Morrison's voice. "Police units are surrounding the building, but they need confirmation of your position before entering. Storage area 7, multiple hostiles remaining," Sarah replied while reloading. "Max and I are engaging victims evacuated through East Ventilation System." A new voice cut through the chaos. Marcus Whitfield himself, speaking with the calm authority of someone accustomed to controlling dangerous situations. "Officer Collins, you're surrounded and outgunned. Surrender now and we can discuss terms." Sarah felt Max press against her leg, the dog seeking reassurance while maintaining tactical readiness. His presence reminded her that they'd faced overwhelming odds before and survived through skill, courage, and absolute trust in each other. "Whitfield, this is over," Sarah called back. "We have 17 missing women documented, 6 victims rescued, and evidence of your entire operation." "You have nothing that will stand up in court," Whitfield replied, his voice moving as he repositioned through the warehouse. "My legal team will ensure any evidence you've gathered is inadmissible due to your unauthorized investigation." Max suddenly alerted to movement on their left flank, his ears indicating multiple individuals attempting to surround their position. Sarah realized Whitfield was using conversation to distract her while his men maneuvered for a coordinated assault. "Max, seek and disable," Sarah commanded, giving her partner authorization to use maximum force in neutralizing threats. The Belgian Malinois moved with lethal efficiency, his training and Sarah's trust allowing him to operate independently while she provided covering fire. Max's first target went down with a scream as 80 pounds of muscle and tactical training overwhelmed him. Sarah heard the distinctive sound of flashbang grenades being armed and knew they had seconds before the warehouse filled with disorienting noise and light. "Max, flash cover!" she shouted, and both she and her partner took protective positions just as the world exploded into overwhelming sensory assault. Through the chaos, Sarah heard Whitfield's voice shouting orders, but the sounds were distorted and direction impossible to determine. Max's training included operating under flashbang conditions, and she felt him move to maintain contact while her vision slowly cleared. When her hearing returned, Sarah realized the warehouse had gone silent except for the approaching sirens. Max was standing over an unconscious Chen, his tactical harness torn, but his stance indicating he was uninjured. "Sarah!" Morrison's voice echoed through the building as SWAT teams made entry. "All clear." Sarah emerged from cover to find 5 men in custody, including Whitfield himself, who was pressing a blood-soaked cloth to a bite wound on his arm. Max had found his target during the flashbang confusion and ended the confrontation with characteristic efficiency. "Officer Collins," Lieutenant Hayes said as she entered the warehouse with the arrest team, "you've got a lot of explaining to do." Sarah looked down at Max, whose tail was wagging with the satisfaction of a job well done. "Lieutenant, we've got 6 rescued victims, documented evidence of 17 connected disappearances, and the entire criminal network in custody." Hayes surveyed the scene, weapons scattered across the floor, multiple suspects under arrest, and a warehouse that clearly showed evidence of being used for human trafficking. "Collins, you may have just solved the biggest case in the department's history." Max pressed against Sarah's leg, seeking the physical contact that confirmed their successful partnership. The dog's presence reminded her that justice sometimes required going beyond official authorization to protect innocent people. "Ma'am," Sarah said quietly, "Max and I were just doing our job." Outside the warehouse, she could see medical teams treating the rescued victims, while crime scene technicians began documenting evidence that would ensure Whitfield and his associates never threatened anyone again. Max looked up at her with eyes that reflected complete satisfaction, the expression he wore when they'd successfully protected people who couldn't protect themselves. "Good boy," Sarah whispered, scratching behind his ears. "We got them all." 3 weeks later, Sarah stood in the courthouse steps watching as Marcus Whitfield was led away in shackles, his expensive suit replaced with an orange jumpsuit that matched his new reality. Max sat at attention beside her, wearing his dress uniform harness for the formal conclusion of the case that had nearly cost them their careers. The judge's words still echoed in Sarah's mind. Life imprisonment without possibility of parole for 17 counts of kidnapping, 6 counts of human trafficking, and conspiracy to commit murder. Davidson and Chen had received similar sentences after their plea bargains confirmed the full scope of Whitfield's operation. Detective Morrison approached with a folder containing the final case documentation. "Sarah, the FBI task force confirmed what we suspected. Whitfield's network extended to 3 other states, with connections to international trafficking rings. Your investigation broke open cases dating back 8 years. Max's tail wagged slightly as he recognized Morrison's voice, but the dog maintained his formal posture appropriate for the courthouse setting. Sarah scratched behind his ears, a gesture that had become automatic during moments of professional satisfaction. "What about Elena Vasquez?" Sarah asked, remembering the cleaning woman whose flight had first alerted them to the scope of Whitfield's operation. Cooperating witness. Her testimony helped prosecutors understand how Whitfield recruited victims through legitimate job postings. Morrison smiled grimly. "She's entered witness protection and will testify against the remaining network members." Sarah felt the weight of 3 weeks' worth of debriefings, internal investigations, and media attention finally lifting from her shoulders. The department's initial attempt to discipline her for unauthorized investigation had evaporated when the full scope of Whitfield's crimes became public knowledge. Captain Sullivan had quietly taken early retirement after Internal Affairs discovered his financial connections to several of Whitfield's charity organizations. The political pressure that had nearly derailed their investigation had been exposed as corruption that reached into the highest levels of city government. Lieutenant Hayes emerged from the courthouse with news that made Sarah's heart swell with professional pride. "Collins, I just got word from the prosecutor's office. All 17 missing women cases have been officially solved. The families finally have answers." Max shifted position to press closer to Sarah's leg, his way of sharing in the emotional moment. The Belgian Malinois had been instrumental not only in breaking the case, but in providing the emotional support that sustained Sarah through the most challenging investigation of her career. "Ma'am, what about our status with the department?" Sarah asked, knowing that her suspension had been lifted but uncertain about long-term consequences of her unauthorized actions. Hayes smiled for the first time in weeks. "Collins, you and Max are being transferred to a new, multi-jurisdictional task force, specializing in organized crime and human trafficking. Federal funding, expanded resources, and authority to investigate cases across state lines." Sarah felt Max's excitement through the slight tremor in his muscles. The dog had learned to associate good news with increased activity and challenging work. After 6 years together, they'd earned the opportunity to tackle cases that matched their specialized skills. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maria Rodriguez, one of the rescued victims who had become an advocate for trafficking survivors. "Officer Collins, wanted you to know I'm starting college next month. Thank you for giving me back my life." Similar messages had arrived from other survivors over the past weeks, each one confirming that their dangerous gamble to rescue the victims had been worth every risk they'd faced. Morrison joined them as they walked toward their patrol vehicle, Max maintaining his professional demeanor despite the celebratory atmosphere. "Sarah, I heard about your new assignment. Think you'll miss regular patrol duties?" Sarah looked down at Max, whose dark eyes reflected the same anticipation she felt about their expanded role. "Ray, after what we've seen these past weeks, I think we're ready for whatever comes next." The Belgian Malinois stood and shook himself, the gesture that always preceded transitions to new activities. His body language indicated eagerness to return to work, to continue the mission that defined their partnership. As they reached their car, Sarah noticed a small crowd had gathered to watch the courthouse proceedings. Among them were family members of the missing women, their faces showing the mix of grief and closure that came with finally knowing their loved one's fate. Max alerted to their presence, his training allowing him to sense the emotional intensity of people dealing with trauma and loss. Sarah guided him toward the families, knowing that sometimes the most important part of police work happened after the arrests were made. "Officer Collins," an elderly woman approached with tears in her eyes. "My granddaughter Jessica was one of the missing girls. I wanted to thank you and your partner for never giving up." Sarah felt the familiar tightness in her throat that came with moments of profound professional meaning. "Ma'am, Jessica, and all the others deserved justice. Max and I were just doing our job." Max accepted gentle pats from several family members, his calm demeanor providing comfort to people who had suffered unimaginable loss. The dog's presence reminded everyone that some partnerships transcended professional duty to become something approaching sacred trust. As the courthouse crowd dispersed, Sarah and Max climbed into their patrol vehicle for what would be their final regular shift before transferring to the task force. The Christmas decorations throughout Atlanta's downtown district had been refreshed since the Central Square incident, but Sarah would never again see holiday displays without thinking of the victims they'd saved. "You know what, Max?" she said as they pulled into traffic. "I think we're just getting started." Max's response was a single bark of agreement, the sound of a partner ready for whatever challenges lay ahead.